I just want to mention tomorrow there is a special event. In my Wednesday class, I'm going to present security risks from a management level for machine learning, large language models, and Microsoft Copilot, which has interesting vulnerabilities. And I had to research this and prepare a report on it for one of my consulting clients. And I'll talk about it. And I've written some extra credit projects where you practice describing the security risks of these products. So if you're interested, connect tomorrow night. It's worth extra credit in any of my classes. All right.
Copilot has a list of forbidden words.
Copilot uses forbidden words?
Has a list of forbidden words.
Oh yes, it probably does, but the corporate version might not, but they generally do. But the real problem with Copilot is that Copilot searches through all your emails and all your documents to answer questions, and it doesn't know if some of those were supposed to be confidential. So if you have any information that is not public, it's likely to become public when you use Copilot. That's the major business problem, and that's not present in any of the OWASP top 10. It's the way it's used creates a vulnerability which is not there in the general properties of MLs.
Are you using the cloud version or
the cloud version? Yeah, Microsoft Copilot in Microsoft 365. So you have, in your cloud account, it has access to your OneDrive and your Office 365.
When you connect the cloud, all those data leak out, right?
They what?
When you use a cloud, all those data leak out.
Well, that's the issue. Everyone's worried about the data leaking out, and this is another way it does leak out. Yeah, that's the problem.
I found out the on-premise large language model.
Yeah.
The uncensored version is more better than the censored version.
On premises? Yeah, that's an option. On some of them you can run on premises.
I'm talking about the uncensored versus the censored version.
The censor version?
Uncensored.
Uncensored. Oh, well, I don't know. In a corporate world, you probably do want them censored. I don't know.
I found the uncensored more less worthy.
Well, I don't know. Let's see. This is the wrong class. That's why I'm not finding the right stuff. Okay, let me try to get to the right class. Okay. There we are. We can get down to mod 10 here. All right. Here we go. Okay, so if you want to analyze an app, an iOS app or an Android app, typically it's going to have a database, and you can examine that database with static analysis. You can just examine the stored data on the phone if you gain root privileges, and then you'll find a database like here. Tinder has a Tinder2.SQLite database. SQLite database is just a very common type of database in small objects like cell phones. And in that image, it'll have a bunch of data. And this will, of course, have information about the contacts people have made on Tinder looking for dates. And so there's a library folder where you'll have cookies and such. You may find usernames and passwords stored in plain text. About half the apps, at least a few years ago when I researched them, about half the apps stored usernames and passwords in their local data store, which is not wise, but they're there. All right, another form of static analysis is doing a code review where you actually look at the code in the app, not the data file stored, but the actual code that controls it. Now, the Android manifest file is where you start, and this gives you the permissions the app asks for, like access, course and find location, network state, Bluetooth, camera, and so on. Many apps ask for way too many permissions like this. And of course, users just usually approve all the permissions because they don't really understand the significance. I'm checking for comments. No new comments. All right. So Dex2Jar is one of the tools that does this. Another one I like is JADX-GUI. These are great tools that can take an Android app and just turn it into readable Java. So very handy. But then there's dynamic analysis. Static analysis is looking at an app without running it, looking at the stored data and analyzing the code without running it. But dynamic analysis means you run the app on a device and then you measure what happens, like the network traffic or whatever is created with something like Wireshark. Often an easier way to find out what an app is doing. All right, so here you have dating apps. Tinder allows deep linking, a way to connect social media accounts. So you can track this down. You've got this Amazon server connected to that server, connected to these servers over here. You know, they can just track down the various servers it goes to, the various domains it uses, and then you can determine where app user data is being stored. You can look at the headers of a request and try to figure out what country it's in. You can tell what country things are in from their IP address and such, and then you can decide whether you have jurisdiction to make a court order in that country to request the data. So here he is getting these Amazon servers, and you can see here it tells you it's in US East. So now you have some idea where it is. And this is also US East, so that's good. And just Googling IP addresses will usually tell you what country they're from too. So if you look at the SQLite database, it shows you how many distance it is to other Tinder users. And you can obtain more precise information about these users. Yeah, New York, data provider. Here, latitude and longitude, down to 2 decimal places. So that's pretty good. You get the exact location of these people, and not just the person whose phone you're analyzing, but their contacts, other users that are nearby. So that's a pretty serious issue if you're using Tinder. Of course, it has come out that if you use any app, they collect all this data about you and they sell it to data brokers who resell it to everybody. So a lot of people can get this data, but for Tinder, you can get it just by looking directly at the Tinder stored data. And then, so Skype has a SQLite database, and it contains contacts and videos and SMSs, conversations, and so on. Calls, contact groups, and all that jazz. And of course, so does Signal and Telegram. All these communication apps have to have some kind of local database to these things so you can read the messages. Signal claims to be end-to-end encrypted, and the encryption is really very good. Telegram claims to be end-to-end encrypted, and they're lying. I avoid using Telegram mainly because it's a Russian product, but it has been demonstrated to also lie, and it doesn't actually encrypt stuff. It just says it does. And the point is, there was a security research done where they claimed that Signal was not properly encrypting messages because you could collect them from the end device like this, but that is unreasonable. You have to decrypt it so you can read it. Everything has to be decrypted on the end device. It's just encrypted in transit, which is all a messenger can do. So, yeah.
Not encrypted?
No, it claims to be.
All those,
It's not always encrypted. There are certain conditions under which it sends data unencrypted. That was what the article said. Not that it's always unencrypted, but it doesn't always use end-to-end encryption the way Signal does.
But all those malware guys living in Russia, they only use the Telegram.
They do. Yes, that's why security researchers use Telegram a lot to find out what criminals are doing. And political people and military people use Telegram to see what's happening in the Ukraine war, right, from people on the front lines. So there's useful information there, but it's like the dark web. It's dangerous stuff in the enemy's web. So I would do it on a burner phone or virtual Linux machine or something. You should be aware you're using unsafe tools to talk to dangerous people. So I don't just use it for normal use. For that I use Signal, which is an American product and is really encrypted.
You expect the malware guys to know better.
Well, the malware guys probably don't care because hacking America is not illegal. The malware guys probably, however, they probably don't know. I wouldn't assume they know better. Criminals are often neglecting simple security precautions. And probably it is real important to them that there be a version of it only in Russian, which I don't think there is for Signal. Anyway, so let me talk about photographs. Photographs are real important in the courtroom because it's very easy for anybody to understand a photograph, and a lot of computer data gets really technical and complicated, like IP addresses and such. Photographs are easy to explain. So it's very important, and of course, child exploitation cases, which until recently was the #1 FBI priority, was so-called innocent images. Then a few years ago, I think after 9/11, terrorism became #1, and innocent images are #2. But it's a huge priority because people kidnap small children, they use them to make pornography, and then they kill them. And so there's a huge desire to catch these people. And so having child pornography is a crime by itself. So the picture itself is the crime, it's the evidence. So this is many organizations have hashed values for so you can just look at hashes of images to see if they are known pedophile images. And this is why there's been a huge controversy for the last several years. The government asked Apple and Google to put a tool on everybody's phone that would scan for these hashes and alert people if they have these known child pornographic images on their phone. And then everybody complained that was an invasion of their privacy. So they didn't do that, but they were going to put it in iCloud, and I think they might have put it in iCloud. They keep going back and forth on whether they're going to do this. The government really wants them to do it, but the privacy advocates really want them not to do it. And I keep swinging back and forth. I'm not quite sure where it is now. Other countries have a similar issue, trying to detect these child exploitation images.
How big a problem is that thing?
What's that?
How big a problem is that thing? It seems like
It's a pretty big problem. A lot of kids get kidnapped, and there's a lot of pedophiles. I was working with some FBI agents a few years ago, and one time I met with one of them. He said, I have to leave early because I'm going at 4 in the morning to go raid a house in Santa Rosa where they're holding kids in the basement in cages. It happens. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's 1% of the kids, but I think maybe it's 0.1% of the kids. It's a lot of kids, thousands of kids, to where people get very, very upset. And of course, they're very, very afraid that it would happen to their kid. So even a small number is enough to make people very upset, of course. Anyway, so Project Fix is like these database of child abuse photo hashes that's shared among law enforcement. So here's some examples. Here's a guy, how photographic evidence was used. So here's a woman that pled guilty to killing her friend, and a belt was found near the body that matched a belt worn by her in a selfie posted on Facebook. So she was caught because she wore a belt that was also in the photo showing the dead body. So that's simple evidence. One they don't put here is John McAfee. John McAfee made McAfee antivirus. Then he left the company, became sort of a wild, crazy man, taking drugs and hanging around prostitutes and Central American stuff. And eventually he apparently killed his neighbor and was on the run for that. And then he posed for a picture for Vice magazine, and they left the GPS turned on. So that picture identified his location, so the police were able to arrest him. And they arrested him and put him in prison in, I think, Costa Rica, and he committed suicide in prison. At least that's the story. Anyway, he was caught because of the metadata in a photograph. A CNN report described how a child predator took pictures of his abusive acts, and they were able to use advanced technology. There was a prescription medication bottle in the picture, and they were able to enhance it enough to identify the first name and 2 letters, along with the first 3 digits of the prescription number, and that was enough to identify whose prescription bottle that was. So that's pretty good. And then there's extortion, of course. This is a huge issue now. That's why, here's another thing people are talking about, and I think various products are coming out for this, where they will not let you send nudes from your phone. I think WhatsApp might have this now, where if you try to take a picture of yourself naked and send it, it will detect that and not send it. They're trying to stop kids from doing this. A lot of teenagers do this, but the problem is those pictures get spread around and then they get extorted. They threaten to send it to their parents and their church and stuff, and then the kids are like blackmailed. And a lot of them get really upset and they commit suicide and stuff. It's a huge issue, that revenge porn and exploitation of people once you get embarrassing pictures of them. So it probably would be really good if the common apps would not let you send naked pictures. That would probably benefit a lot of teenagers. So the digital photographies themselves. If you take it to the camera, it can be stored on any kind of storage device like the SD card or anywhere else. Typically it's a FAT file system. And there's another file system here too you see a lot is DCIM. I see these, the root directory DCIM in the digital camera. Anyway, so the social media websites have huge repositories of photo images. Facebook, of course, has huge ones, and they automatically identified all the faces and labeled them at one time. I think they're still doing that. Flickr, Instagram, and Snapchat all have them. Snapchat advertised that you could use it more safely because the photos would vanish after a few seconds, but the problem is there's no way to really do that. If the photograph appears for a few seconds on my phone, I could just take a screenshot, take a picture with another phone, perhaps find the stored image in a cache somewhere. You know, once you've sent something to somebody, you don't really know that it's been deleted. By the way, the same thing's true of remote wipe. This is a common mobile device management feature. I've got it on my phone now for one of my customers. You just put your phone under control of the company, like a domain controller, and they can decide, like they detected that I had that stupid social network app that's hot on my phone, and they said, you got to erase it, so I erased it. But they could wipe my phone. If I told them my phone was stolen, they would send a wipe signal to try to erase all the data, so no company data would be on there. The problem is, you never really know if that worked. So it's an issue. The same thing with this. You send a photograph, you think it's deleted, but how do you know it's really deleted and there's no copy of it? You don't. But in general, it probably means that if you send 100 pictures by Snapchat, the odds of them being preserved is a lot less than if you send them to something else like Instagram. All right, and the picture files themselves are in various formats. EXIF is a very common format, and this stores extra data with the picture. The name of the person owning the phone, the latitude, longitude, model of the phone, all kinds. all kinds of stuff, and that's very useful. Now, it can be manipulated. It doesn't prove anything. You can fake the EXIF data, but usually people have the EXIF data because it's just the default on their phone and they don't know it. So they're leaving a trail of the physical location of every place they take a picture without knowing it, and that's handy. Yeah, well, there always have been risks to children, but anyway. All right, so raster graphics is a grid of pixels, just a series of dots with a certain color, and a megapixel is 1,000,000 pixels. You hear cameras rated by how many megapixels they have. The more megapixels, the better in general. And you could store it in its original format, and that would be a bitmap file, but that would be huge. Even an image would be megabytes. So they use compression algorithms. JPEG compresses things, makes them much smaller, but they degrade the quality of the image. They try to remove details you can't see, but it is a lossy compression. Bitmap is uncompressed and big. Ping is lossless compression. All the data is there, but it's compressed like a zip file. And GIF and TIFF are other ways to compress data. All right, so that's an issue. Ping is lossless. GIF is also lossless, although it has a color limitation. You can only have 256 colors, so it can degrade the color information. And TIFF is another format with lossless compression. In Windows systems and many systems, you have an extra copy of every photograph, a thumbnail, so you can view the folder and see little thumbnails like slides of the images. So there's really 2 copies of every image, one full size and one shrunk, and you'll find a thumbnail cache in there. The vector graphics are another kind of graphics not intended for photographs, but intended for things like logos and cartoons, where you describe a mathematical equation. Draw a circle, draw a triangle, color red here, color that there. It's just a series of descriptions of the shapes to draw, and so your browser will just draw it, your image viewer will just draw it at top resolution, and you can zoom in as much as you want. It will always stay equally sharp because it just recreates it mathematically. So vector graphics create high-quality graphics that are small, but they only work for simple lines and shapes and stuff. You wouldn't put a photograph in this format. So the best thing would be an original photograph, but in its absence, you can use a duplicate if it's a genuine copy, which of course is the case for online photographs. There is no actual physical photograph. All there is an online copy. Digital photographs have lots of ways to improve the clarity. You can do a lot. So for example, here's a picture. This criminal sent out this picture and then decide to conceal his identity by smearing the stuff around with like 2 or 3 turns here with some kind of graphic manipulation tool like Photoshop. And this, of course, is not a good idea. Now, if this was real oils on a painting and you were smearing the oils, they would mix up and destroy the information. But these are just pixels, so you can rotate it back along this shape and put them back. And they were able to do that and get a pretty much restored picture of the guy well enough to arrest him. So, this is the thing. This is actually a huge problem, redacting things. If you have something like a document or a photograph and you want to remove part of it before publishing it, it is difficult to do. PDFs are the worst, like contracts. People will redact them by just drawing black squares on them, but the text is still there behind them. You can just copy and paste it and see the text. So it's a thing to be aware of. It is a quite common issue that people improperly redact things. There was an attorney in San Francisco who actually got in trouble for publishing evidence that turned out to be improperly redacted, and his response to that was to take my forensics course, this course here, to try to learn better how to redact his files. Anyway,
So when you cut out,
yeah.
do a back box on the picture, all those bits inside that box delete, right?
If you have a graphic image program and you draw a big black square, I think you're right. But if you have a PDF file and you draw a big black square, it's not.
Just put on a layer.
Yeah, that's right. It's put on another layer in front. And that could probably happen to you in Photoshop too. Photoshop has layers. So you have to know your tool. If it was a really simple tool like Microsoft Paint, then I think you're right. Draw a black square, that stuff is really gone. But these more complicated tools, it just looks like it's gone. This happened to me. I started a lawsuit this way. I got a list of people in an Excel spreadsheet that I was supposed to send a notice to, and there were 20 people who were managers and were not supposed to get it, and they had just hidden the managers. Right-click and hide the rows. So if you looked at the numbers, you'd see a row 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. But I didn't notice that, so I did a mail merge. It got them all and mailed them out and started a whole lawsuit because I mailed it to the wrong people because the redaction had not been done correctly.
So they can turn it back the columns, the rows.
Yeah, because when you do the mail merge, it finds them. What they should have done is delete those rows, so they were gone. Then it would have worked. Well, of course, arguably, I should have caught it, and then after that, we changed the procedures at our company, so every time we get a database, they had to give us a total. How many are there? So we would notice if that happened again. Yeah, but
But the picture, those are metadata. If your phone is like offline, there's no way to get the longitude data and all those stuff.
well, it's a good question, and I don't know what it will do. It has a place to fill in latitude and longitude. Maybe it will just put in the last value it had. Maybe it will make some kind of estimate. It's a good question. I know one thing. There's a place in like Kansas where some guy is always getting people showing up trying to find things because something like the lost my phone will default to that position if it doesn't have the data. So it'll fill in something, and it might be wrong. And that's an issue. All right, let's see, any more questions? Nothing new? All right, I'm going to stop the